This is Prisma Lopez-Marin here on 18 WJTS on our Monday Conversations here in Ferdinand with Chris James. Hello, Chris James.
Hello, Prisma.
It's always great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Always welcome to bring you into Ferdinand and be able to talk about our fine town.
And speaking of Ferdinand, let's talk about the wrap-up of the Ferdinand Folk Festival.
Folk Festival wrapped up Saturday, September 17th. The weather leading up to it was not what most forecasters would call promising for a good day, but we had a pretty good rain shower Friday afternoon. The ground absorbed all of that because it had been dry for a couple of weeks prior, and then we had another soaking rain for about 2 hours on Saturday morning. Hats off to all of our volunteers, our committee folks, and especially the vendors who showed up in the rain Saturday morning. They were setting booths up, even though it was pouring down rain. Basically paid no attention to that. They were getting their stuff ready to go for the day. It's always been a rain or shine event, and we've always been the beneficiary of the shine portion of that equation for 7 years. And we were delayed a little bit on the main stage getting our music started, mainly because it took a period of time for everything to dry out for the sound guy to hook everything in. The previous night he had set up all the lights, had all of that ready to go in anticipation of ready for Saturday, left all the sound equipment unplugged knowing it was going to rain to make the dry out process more thorough and in a sense easier. And it took about 2.5 hours for all of that to dry out. He had a leaf blower to help dry off all the connections, just a large hair dryer in a sense, to dry off all of the connections to make sure that once it was plugged in, they didn't start blowing amps or killing speakers, which would have been bad all the way around. But once we got started, it was about 1 p.m. on the main stage. The first 3 acts were all very gracious in shortening their sets to allow us to try to get kind of back onto our regular schedule. And then the weather was fine all afternoon and evening long. There were a few gaps in the hillside lawn into the later afternoon that aren't normally there, but once we hit about 5 p.m. on up until Rich Robinson's performance that night to close it out, all of those holes plugged up, and we had another very solid crowd out on the hillside, and it was a very successful day in terms of merchandise sales. We sold pretty much everything we had to sell. We sold it. All of the new shirts. We had some what we call off-season shirts, sort of a general design that we used during some of our fundraisers and things. All of the remaining merchandise we had for that was sold out. I think we have about a half a dozen Folk Fest hats left and a handful of adult tie-dye shirts. We had tie-dyeing for the children. All of the kid sizes were scarped up pretty quickly. We've got 5, maybe 6 of the adult-sized T-shirts left. Otherwise, all of our merchandise was sold. We're right now kind of in the process of paying off our final bills to see how much, if any, money we have left over that we can put into the bank, kind of nest egg for future years' folk festivals in the event of that big rain that comes and really does wash us out for the day, that we've got money in the bank to handle expenses that may pop up anyway. So we're feeling pretty good about how the day went. And again, just a huge thank you to everyone who showed up in terms of the vendors, the volunteers, and just the public in general for coming in, knowing that it was kind of a soggy morning, but we still had people coming out. Actually, some started Friday evening, but a lot of folks on Saturday morning were camping out and marking their picnic tables or their spots on the hillside with their blankets and things. Had some pop-up tents, which as the day went on and the rain went away, we had to ask some of those folks to kindly lower those so the folks behind could see. But otherwise, it went very well. We've had a debriefing session last week, some things that we want to try to work on for next year, get maybe a little more of a jump start on. We've got a couple of shifts in our personnel on our committee, so some folks are going to be picking up a couple of more responsibilities. We've got a couple of new people on taking over some things, so we're still getting everything sorted out in that respect. But all in all, year 7 was fabulous. We had about a 2-week breather. We had our debriefing last week, and as we go through here October, November range, we're going to start to put together a more detailed booklet of who does what and when types of things as we go through the years, because the Folk Fest is not going anywhere. But as our committee starts to step back, some of the originals have left, and as the others maybe step back and say, I'd like to watch the fest more than work the fest, as they bring in new people to take over their responsibilities, they can go through the binder and say, okay, I do X, Y, and Z leading up to the fest, and then the day of I do these things. As town manager, I'm the permanent member of the committee, so I'm here until I'm not here. So that'll help with any transitions as well, because I can help anybody new coming on say, well, you need to do this and that, and try to keep the continuity flowing. But a tip of the hat to everyone again. Bill Potter, great job. MC work again up on the stage. Keeping folks in tune with things as we did shorten some sets and we had to flip-flop a couple of acts. He handled it very well. Everything was scripted, but at the same time, when it's a live situation, you don't always go by what is written down. You have to kind of play it by ear, and Bill did a great job as always with that, and kept the folks informed, let them know of the other events going on with our market stage, all of the children's activities over in the lower shelter house. That went very well. We had just a very small number, 4 or 5 vendors who did not show up at all because of the rain, and I had received word either directly or indirectly from all of them that they weren't going to come, either because of distance and weather concerns or just weather concerns in general. So it wasn't like a big surprise. We'd go through vendor row and there'd be a gap someplace. Well, why didn't they show up or let us know? We knew about it ahead of time, so we were able to prepare for that, and it worked out well all the way around. So it was a great folk festival, and we're starting work in some form and fashion already for the 2017 edition, and make year number 8 bigger and better than this year, if at all possible.
I'm sure it will be possible, just because it seems like it was a huge event, like always. In our 18 WJTS, Bill Potter, as you mentioned, as well as Joy Holt, or reporter Joy Holt, were there, and they said it was definitely very well attended and very well organized.
We were happy with the crowd that came. The overall final number, and we don't have a fancy metric where we can say X times Y gives you Z. We usually guesstimate attendance between 8,000 and 10,000. This year, because of the rain, I would say probably between 7,000 and 8,000. But still, through the evening, the hillside was, again, just packed in with people, and just a great time was had by all. And the cleanup on Sunday morning for that many people was not a overwhelming task. I mean, there were 3 or 4 spots on the hillside where all the trash kind of came together, which is fine. We can, if you keep it in a spot, it makes it a lot easier for the cleanup instead of just scattered all around the hill. But even at that, folks have always been great about looking for the trash boxes or the recycling containers to put their cans and their bottles and the cups in the trash, get all of that off the ground before they leave that night. And that makes it a lot easier for us on the actual cleanup the next morning, and even that night, once everything is done, some of our volunteers got the tractors out and the gators, and we loaded up the trash bags and put them in 2 spots on either side of the park, so it would be easier for the trash truck when it came in Saturday morning or Sunday morning to come in and load things up. It was in 2 spots. Nobody had to wait for us to really haul a lot of stuff up to the piles. Most of it was already pre-congregated, if you will, and it's just a matter of the time it took to throw them into the truck, compact it down, drive around to the other side of the park, and do the process over. But it went very well, and we're looking forward to an even better one in 2017.
Good. Definitely was wondering in terms of how do people get involved if this is a huge event to be part of. How can you become part of the committee? Who plans it?
The easiest way probably is to contact me. My email is cjames@ferdinandindiana.org. I check email all the time. Even if I'm not in office, I can check my email at home or on the weekend. My desk contact is 367-2282. If I'm not in, leave a message on the machine. I'll get back with you. But just reach out and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of, whether it's super involved or just sort of behind the scenes type of work. I'm good with doing this type of work or that type of process, or I have a knack for design, or whatever the case is. let me know, and then I can forward it on to the other members of our committee, because I kind of oversee it, and we have different people that head up different divisions of it. So I can let my merch person know, hey, we've got somebody who wants to help with the day of shirt sales and things, or in terms of getting all of the booths or booth spaces marked, or getting the tents up or taken down, putting the banners up, any of that type of work. Or if they've got a knack for the music and they say, hey, I've got some contacts to maybe get this artist or that artist in, I'd like to help out. We'll take any comers on that. They can be as involved or as uninvolved as need be, and we'll put them to the best use we can. And anybody who wants to help is more than welcome to join in the fun. It's a lot of work, but you enjoy the work, and the day just flies by. It's like a wedding in a way. There's months of preparation, and then the actual day itself is a blur. And then you're just looking back at pictures. Oh, we did this or we did that. It's a similar kind of thing. The day itself, you start early and wrap up late, but it's kind of a blur. And that's part of the process of our debrief meeting. Different people are in different spots in the park through the day, and they'll see certain things, and they can say, well, this went very well, or maybe we can position this differently next year, or bring this group back, or maybe freshen this part up. And because everybody has eyes on different parts of the park, that helps us determine how to go forward as well for the events and activities in future years' fests.
It was definitely well documented on social media. I did see a lot of the kids' activities. I did want to know more about why it's such a big emphasis on having kids' activities there, because I saw a lot of that.
Well, this is a family-friendly, environmentally friendly event. We've got food vendors, we've got arts and crafts vendors, we have education and environmental vendors. So folks that have an interest in solar power, and we've had an individual, Ryan Zaricki, in. I think this was the third year that his solar panel truck actually provided the electric service for our market stage. So we don't have to worry about running extension cord to a couple of the outlets to get our power. He provides it through his solar powers. So the actual panels absorb the sun. He stores them in the battery, however that process works, and then they're able to do connection, and it runs off of the power, the solar power from the van, and that way it saves electricity. And so that's that's a very real example of how things work. But we have vendors in for environmental issues, whether it's clean air or saving trees, or how to plant more forest land, how to best manage things, just a whole plethora of things. And so we try to encompass everything. And the family-friendly part, mom and dad could be out on the hill watching the music. The kids, necessarily, depending on the age, that might not be their thing. So we have the children's activities in the lower shelter house. Master Brand was huge this year, sponsoring a lot of those events. And in previous years, when the weather is good, we have big bounce inflatables in. And that's contained in the ball field, and the kids get their bracelet, and they just can do their thing because they're very well supervised by the big bounce personnel. So everybody benefits. It's not just a mom and dad thing and the kids are pulled along. Well, we're coming, so you have to come. Yeah. There's something for everyone. And then as the day goes on, they can hit the different food vendors. So if they want their lunch or supper or both, as the case may be, they can hit one of those vendors, check out the great food available, because we have a lot of options from each of the vendors. We try to, as best we can, each of the food vendors have a specific item for them that they're the only booth that sells, whether it's a turkey tenderloin, or if it's a pulled pork, or if they've got ice cream smoothies or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. Certain things, hamburgers, hot dogs, brats, that's sort of a catch-all. Anybody can do that. But the more specialty items, each food vendor has their own niche. And so, if you want turkey tenderloins, you go to this booth. If you want pulled pork, you go here. And just on down the line. The football team sold fried hearts this year, which was brand new, chicken hearts. Okay. Sorry. And that was a big success. And so they were the only ones to have that. So each booth has its own sort of category of food. so that there is a variety and you're not just stuck with burgers and dogs and brats. You've got a lot of different things. And we have the same folks every year back. The football team was new. We'll still get a couple of new people this year or that year, but the core group that was there from the early years, they're back, and they'll be back again next year. And for as many years as we have it and they're in existence, they'll be here. So it works out. And these booths, they use the monies they raise as fundraisers for their organization, whether it's the Boy Scouts or Psi Iota Xi or the Knights of Columbus or whatever. They can take those dollars and put it into their piggy bank for projects that they are involved with and they need to have a funding mechanism for. So it's a win-win all the way around. People get great food, the booths collect the money, and they get 100% of the profits. And so they're able to put that money aside and know when it's time to fund their particular project, whether it's a holiday-based theme or whatever it is, they've got dollars raised at the Folk Festival plus other events that they can put toward that event.
That's incredible to bring it all a full circle. It has such great variety, and we look forward to what will become of next year. Another topic that I did want to talk about was the community crossings and how that's progressing for Ferdinand.
That's going along very well. Again, credit to Tom Leakin and the staff at the street department for all of the work they did in advance to even get the application approved by NDOT. But we got the go-ahead on that a month and a half or so ago, I believe, was when the official word came down. And then on actually Folk Fest Friday, Tom and Bev Schulteis attended a grant meeting up at Vincennes, and NDOT officials actually decided to try to simplify the process. The way it had been set up originally, depending on how many projects you had in your application, you would get that many, in a sense, donations back to you from NDOT. They would fund each project individually, whether you did them one at a time or did them all together. You would submit bills for each one, and they would reimburse you for each project. We had 18 projects on our list. Other communities may have had twice as many or only a third of that many. They decided it's easier, we'll just give you all of the money at one time, still do the proper processing in terms of submitting bills and such, but they give us just the lump sum of money to pay it all out instead of Project 1, Project 7, Project 13. As the bills come in and are approved by council, by Bev, by Tom, okay, this is a legitimate expense, we can pay that claim. We just write the check out of one lump sum. And then we have our half of that match anyway. It was a 1-to-1 match. In our case, we committed $362 or something $1,000 and got a similar amount from the state. So for these first projects, even though we haven't gotten the money from NDOT yet, we still have our half of the money ready to go. And we're accepting bids right now through the council meeting on October 11th for, I think it's about a half a dozen or so street paving projects. We're also already in the process of one of the bigger items, the Virginia Street Sidewalk Project, which in a sense serves as a walking path and sidewalk that provides connectivity from our 18th Street Park and our community center, the library, the Y, the community center itself, the community campus, on down to 5th Street Park. So there is an actual route that you can walk on this new sidewalk or replaced sidewalk from 18th Street to 5th Street Park or back. So it provides a safer route of travel. If the kids have ball games in the summertime, if they're going from their home to 5th Street, they can just take that sidewalk right down to the park, staying off the road. For folks who do a lot of walking in the evening, they walk in the streets if there's no sidewalks, and they know to watch for traffic, and traffic knows to watch for folks, but that way they'll actually be on sidewalk now. And they've gotten a good chunk of sidewalk in and or replaced between 16th, West 16th and West 13th Street, and have already dug out the pathway for the next set of sidewalk on between 13th and 12th. And that will continue as weather allows as far down Virginia toward 5th Street as we can get in while the weather is still good this fall. Schwering's, these guys are top-notch with the concrete work. They do all of the curb and guttering that we need to put in, and every place that we hit a corner, we we have to have ADA compatible ramping. That's something the state handed down years ago, and we've been on the front lines of that anyhow. But now as we put in these new blocks of sidewalk where there may have been just regular curb before, you now have to have the ADA compliant ramping. So that comes into play, and so that puts extra work in there as well. But it's worked out very well. I encourage folks to take a drive down Virginia Street between 13th and 16th, especially right now, and you can see where the work has gone on, or there's a couple of segments we need to fill in some gaps to get the remainder poured. But we've made a nice jump start on this project, and hopefully by early spring of next year at the latest, that part will be pretty much complete, and then we can focus on the paving projects. And the rumor was NDOT is going to do another type of grant program for next year, so we may have another application that we put together for other projects and try to combine our monies again for next year and have another big boom in paving and or sidewalk work next year. So lots of things on the table with that, but so far so good. We've made nice progress already with that section of the Community Crossings project.
And that's good to hear, just because I know as a community member, it's great to see progress, but it's also great to see that community is investing in their streets, is investing in their community in general, things that we don't normally see as needed, but it really is needed, especially for the winter time. If it does end up ending in January, that's winter help for people who do walk.
Yes.
So thank you so much for informing us, as always, for having us here in Ferdinand.
Always welcome to come into town, Prisma. You know that.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us here on Monday Conversations.